Imagine finding yourself in a place so radiant, so filled with love, that every worry you've ever had simply melts away. Now imagine standing face to face with Jesus and sharing a moment of laughter together. Today, we're sharing Nick's remarkable story, a journey that led him to an encounter with Jesus, where they laughed together, and Nick received a message that changed his life forever. Nick's experience wasn't a dream, he says, but an undeniable glimpse into a realm of light and love. What he saw, what he felt, is a story of transformation, healing, and a joy that transcends words. Join us as we journey with Nick into this unforgettable moment. Nick's life took a painful turn just months before this extraordinary experience. It all began with a phone call that would change everything.
I'll never forget that day. June 2009. I got a call that my father was on life support. My dad was only 53. I couldn't believe it. My brother and I had no idea he was that sick. We rushed to the hospital, driving through the night, but nothing could prepare me for what came next.
When Nick arrived, he had to face an unimaginable decision. His brother couldn't be there, so Nick alone had to decide whether to disconnect his father from life support.
I stayed late into the night, listening to my dad struggling to breathe. He was suffocating on his own fluids. That memory haunted me. The sound of his breathing, the feeling of helplessness. It all stayed with me. I kept wondering if I'd done the right thing, if there was something more I could have done.
Every little detail would bring it all back, triggering waves of grief and guilt that felt like electric shocks. He remembered his father's last visit to Arizona, just a few months before he passed away. Together, they'd shared precious memories.
He drove all the way from the Midwest to see me, my wife, and my son. He seemed so tired, not like himself, but I just thought he was getting older. We had a great time, though. We went to see a movie, fed ducks at the park. He spent hours building a model spaceship with my son.
But there was something more. During that visit, Nick and his dad shared a deep conversation about life and the afterlife.
We talked about what might happen after we die. He told me about his uncle's funeral years ago, how he felt his uncle's presence afterward. He even told me he'd try to reach out to me somehow after he passed. I held on to that, but after he was gone, I waited and waited. And nothing. Just silence.
The silence left Nick feeling abandoned. His grief grew darker. Nights were filled with nightmares and panic attacks, where he would wake up screaming as the reality of his father's passing crashed over him, fresh every time.
I'd pass out trying to get to the bathroom. I'd hit the floor, my wife would have to shake me awake. It felt like I was spiraling, like I was being swallowed by this darkness. I couldn't see a way out.
But then, on an ordinary night, when he wasn't expecting anything, Nick's world changed in an instant. It was an ordinary night. Nick wasn't in his worst despair nor at peace. He was simply lying in bed, preparing for sleep. Then, without warning, he found himself in an entirely new place.
I wasn't drifting off. It was as if I blinked and suddenly I was somewhere else, like stepping through a doorway. One moment I was in bed, the next, I was in this room.
A room filled with golden shimmering light, a place unlike anything he'd ever seen. And in this room, someone awaited him.
I looked around and it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. The room felt alive, made of light that was constantly shifting and moving like liquid gold. It was as if the very walls and floor were glowing, giving off warmth and energy. And somehow I just knew. This place wasn't new to me. It felt like I'd been there before, like coming home after a long, difficult journey.
Surrounded by this light, Nick felt an overwhelming sense of peace. It was as if all the burdens he'd carried were lifted, replaced with a deep, indescribable love.
I wasn't thinking about my life. my grief, my family. I was just present, fully in the moment. And then there he was. Jesus, standing before me, more real than anyone I'd ever met.
Jesus appeared in a form Nick instantly recognized, yet with a beauty and radiance that were almost too much to comprehend.
I knew him right away. It was like he had this perfect, familiar presence. He looked at me with these piercing, loving eyes, and I could feel every ounce of love and understanding in that gaze. It was as if he could see right through me, every thought, every feeling, every part of me that I usually keep hidden. I didn't need words. I could feel his thoughts in my mind.
Nick was overcome by awe and, surprisingly, by humor. He found himself admiring Jesus' presence, almost in a lighthearted way.
I thought to myself, wow, Jesus is really good looking. And then instantly I felt embarrassed. I thought, oh no, he can hear what I'm thinking. But to my surprise, Jesus laughed. He laughed out loud, this deep, joyful laugh that filled the room. And suddenly I was laughing too. It felt like every worry, every burden I had been carrying was washed away in that laughter.
In that laugh, Nick sensed something profound, a divine sense of joy, a reminder of the lightness and love that God desires for us.
It was like he was saying, don't take life so seriously. You're exactly who you're meant to be. He reassured me that I was perfect just as I was. He could see all my faults, my doubts, my mistakes, and yet he looked at me with this unwavering love, telling me that I was on the right path, that everything I'd been through was exactly as it needed to be.
As Jesus continued to communicate, Nick felt the message of unconditional love and acceptance sink into his soul.
He told me, without words, that we focus too much on rules and our own flaws. He wanted me to know that God's love is so much bigger than we can comprehend. He told me that I needed to stop worrying so much, that life isn't about perfection or punishment. It's about love, joy, and laughter. It felt like every single doubt I'd ever had was being dissolved by his presence.
Nick was filled with peace and acceptance. It was as though he had been given a glimpse into a divine reality, a truth that transcended all earthly understanding.
That room, that light, it felt like the essence of God's love. I knew I wasn't alone, that my grief, my doubts, my pain, they were all part of this journey I was meant to walk. I felt like he'd given me this gift of knowing, of truly knowing, that everything was okay and that I was exactly who I needed to be.
And just as quickly as it had begun, the experience was over. Nick found himself back in his bed gasping for air, filled with a new understanding that would stay with him forever.
I gasped for air like I'd been pulled back into my body. I was still lying in bed, but everything felt different. The weight of grief, the guilt, it was all lifted. I felt this deep peace, a sense of purpose. I knew I wasn't alone, and I had seen Jesus, and he'd given me the strength I needed to carry on.
Nick's story is a reminder of God's promise to be with us, even in our darkest moments. In John 14:2, Jesus tells us, "In my Father's house are many rooms. I am going there to prepare a place for you." This place Nick visited, filled with love and light, is a glimpse of that eternal promise, a room prepared just for him and for each of us. Nick's experience reminds us that we are loved, cherished, and that even in our struggles, God's light and presence are never far. We need only to have faith. What do you think lies beyond? Have you ever felt an unexplainable sense of peace or comfort that stayed with you? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If Nick's story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to Glimpses into Eternity. Join us as we explore more extraordinary stories of hope, love, and the mysteries of the afterlife. Thank you for watching.